Vacations, especially for the holiday season, are supposed to be relaxing. You book your room to breathe and to relax and to take in the ocean views. And this one has really good reviews. Your first night should be full of kicking back and easing your mind and escape. But instead, it turns into a mind game or a haunting. You can't be sure. But you know you locked your door and put your keys on the counter and your lighter on the table and your shoes by the chair. But 20 minutes later, the lighter isn't there. The keys are nowhere to be found. And your afternoon becomes rummaging through suitcases, opening every cabinet, lifting the trash bag like a detective in your own rental. And that's not the scariest part. The razor blade is. Hi everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. You might know me from my true crime channel here on YouTube, Kimbyrleigha. I am Kimbyrleigha or Kimbyr, and this is Candidly Kimbyr. And on this channel, I'm going to be diving into some of the most interesting, creepy, real life stories from around the web, mostly focusing on where? Reddit, one of my favorite places. And of course, our Halloween series has come to an end, but that doesn't mean the creepy stories have. So if you are traveling for the holiday season, if you're going away for Thanksgiving or Christmas, or maybe just to get away from it all, then these stories might make you think twice about where you should go. So let's just jump right in. This one comes from the tried and true Let's Not Meet subreddit, and it's entitled Guy in the Woods Behind My Airbnb. I'm already scared. Just by the title, I'm already scared. It's posted by the user Pending Disasters, which actually seems pretty fitting. She writes, "This is my first post ever, so I'm sorry if it's worded weird or the formatting is off. So me, my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend drove up to Big Bear on 6/26. Then a day later, another friend of ours drove up on 6/27, and he was supposed to sleep downstairs. And the couples sleep upstairs since there's only 2 bedrooms. The first night we stayed there, it was kind of creepy because the cabin was pretty remote. And of course, there's absolutely no lights outside. It is the woods with coyotes howling, bears, but nonetheless, completely normal activity. On the 27th, around 12 a.m., my boyfriend and I are in bed when suddenly our friend that's sleeping downstairs comes banging on our door, freaking out, saying he saw shadows in the woods and that the motion light came on and there was thumping outside. We got a little freaked, but my boyfriend gets out of bed and checks the entire cabin and even goes outside. Nothing. First of all, I just have to cut in and say, yes, it would be weird to have shadowy things going on in the woods, but it is the woods. Also, why is he going outside? But I digress. She said, we go up to the other couple's room where there's a porch with a sliding glass door that looks out to the woods. It's important to note that I am a naturally very anxious and scared person, while my boyfriend is a rock. He's calm and logical, while I tend to jump to the worst scenario. My boyfriend goes over to check the last place in the cabin. So he pulls the curtain and he jumps and yells, "Oh my God." And at this point, I am terrified. My boyfriend is 180 pounds CrossFit coach, and to see a big guy like that scared is nauseating. He locked the door and backed away slowly. He quietly says, "There's a large man standing outside staring at us. He's just standing in the woods looking at us." Okay, I'm cutting in to say 4'11" me would be freaking out. I'm terrified of the outdoors. I'm absolutely insanely scared of these kind of situations. So I don't know. I probably wouldn't have stayed there to begin with, but back to the story. I'm sure you can relate. At least some of you can. She says at this point, I'm thinking, he's effing with me. He looks at me and says, "Go lock the door." That's when I knew he was serious. Everyone is freaking out. I run and lock the door behind us, and we all decide to stay in the room to keep an eye out. It's the middle of summer, and it's really hot, but we refuse to open a window. I'm so scared, but try not to show it as everyone else seemed to have calmed down. About 30 minutes go by. Nothing happens. I get annoyed with the heat and the fact that there's 5 people in a tiny room and 3 of them are men. So my boyfriend and I go back to our room. I'm still pretty spooked. So my boyfriend tries to cheer me up. At this point, it's about 1:30 a.m. I told him I was too scared to sleep with the lights off. He tells me that's totally fine and he understands. So we just lay with the lights completely on. Finally, I start drifting off to sleep when I hear a thud and I sit up and look at my boyfriend. He looks at me and then the power cuts. Oh my God. Okay, I'm scared for you, OP. I would run. And honestly, I would just be out of there. But then you're outside with the monsters. OP wrote, I immediately start sobbing. I'm trembling. I can't see anything because it's pitch black. I try to get out of bed and run, but my legs get tangled in the sheets and I fall. My boyfriend picks me up and we grab our phone and we run to the other room where everyone else was staying. I'm hysterical at this point. I try to contact our host, but nothing will go through. I try to call my dad, but all of our phones say no service. We are alone out there. Thank God the friend who drove up after us had a different carrier because his phone had 1 bar. So he calls the local sheriff. I realize now it's a bit of an overreaction, but at the time we thought that we were going to die. He's on the phone with the sheriff and they transfer us to the utilities company. We give the address and they tell us that we are too far in the woods and they don't cover that area. Of course they don't, OP. Of course they don't. She goes on to say, at this point, we're wondering whether the entire area is without power or whether the man outside just cut our power. I cry more and we call 911 to report suspicious activity and a power outage. They send the fire department. A few hours go by. It's 3 o'clock in the morning and suddenly the power comes back on. We fall asleep and the next day we talked to some locals in the area and we told them our power went out and they said that was strange and shouldn't have happened. He told us the only reason that happens out here is because of a snowstorm. He said he could not explain it. So to the man in the woods who might have cut our power, let's not meet. Oh my God. That is a crazy story, which, you know what? You didn't even get any closure. And that's frightening because who was the man? Who was this guy outside? I would be so scared. And did you continue to stay? Because I have so many questions. But let's get to the comments, shall we? Anna Freud said, this is some horror movie shit, down to you getting your feet tangled in the sheets and falling. I'm glad you're okay now. And I forgot about that. Yeah, the fact that happened, it figures, right? Just falling in the sheets when you're trying to run. It is kind of like a slasher movie would be. Another commenter said, creepy as F. I'm not a big fan of guns, but in a situation like this, I would feel so much more secure with one. Holy F. OP commented back saying, I bought a taser on Amazon, but it didn't come in time for the trip, so I left without it. My luck, huh? Okay. And some of y'all know this and some of you don't, but my dad used to be a felon. I'm not going to go deep into this right now, but at some point while we're getting to know one another, because by the way, I'm reading and loving your stories in the comments, so please keep them coming. But as we get to know one another better, I will let you in on some of his secrets because he was a burglar among other things. So I'm going to say me being anxious and on edge all the time and never wanting to be home alone, that's why. He's taught me exactly what works and what won't in these situations. And yes, tasers can most times help you, but you have to, number one, be near to be able to grab it, right? 2, you have to be close enough to use it. And 3, you have to be able to aim it while in a very high tension situation. I have one that does shoot like 15 feet away and it's from the taser company. I'll link it for you, but I'm just going to tell you it's not cheap, but it will get the job done. But let's continue. Mysterious Movie said, nope. Just a big fat nope on this one. I have been to cabins in the woods, and the darkness combined with my paranoia makes my mind go to super dark places. Aliens, Bigfoot, serial killers, just totally off the rails. That fear combined with a shadowy figure chilling outside while I internally and extremely freak out inside, hard pass. I'm going camping in a few weeks in a tent with my 2 children under the age of 3. This should be fun. Okay, so wait a minute. You're just commenting how scared and paranoid you are, but then you're going camping? That wouldn't be me. No. That's just my thoughts exactly. And then speaking of darkness and shadowy figures, the next story combines a lot of fears. And when I was reading it, I got the chills and I was scared in my office because to me, these real life stories are really scary. And this is also from the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Are you ready? The title is Last Cabin on the Right. And the poster is 8 toenails. And already I have some questions with just the name because I wondered, are you missing just the nails or 2 entire toes? But let's get into the story. She wrote, "This past New Year's was mine and my boyfriend's 4-year anniversary. We typically don't do much, so this year we decided to make it special by planning a romantic getaway. At the time, the 2 of us were living in Seattle and wanted to rent a cabin in a snowy, small town for the weekend. We found a cabin on Airbnb with a hot tub and we were sold. The cabin was, of course, the last house on the road. To get to it, you had to drive down a small, removed private road that ended in a roundabout. Off the roundabout was a long uphill driveway leading up to our cabin. We got to the cabin and it was snowy and beautiful. The cabin itself sat on top of a garage and you needed to take the stairs on the backside of the property to get to the front door. When we got inside, there was a booklet with all of the cabin information outlined. The book said that during the snowy season, don't be surprised if their contracted snowplowers showed up to clear off the driveway. Okay, sounds good. We unpacked and realized that there was no service on either of our phones. But the booklet told us that if we need anything, there was a landline in the cabin. We spent the first night by the fire playing board games and drinking wine. The weekend was exactly what we needed. We planned to spend the next day in town, and that night, I booked us a reservation for a nice dinner. We were gone almost all day, only returning briefly to get dressed up and enjoy some good food. Dinner was great, and we were excited to head back to the cabin for some champagne and hot tubbing. While at dinner, the temperature had dropped, and it snowed for the first time that day, coating everything in a fresh layer of powder. We drove down the private road and got to the driveway. At that point, my boyfriend stopped the car, headlights shining in front, and asked if I noticed the new tire tracks. I looked at the driveway, hoping to quickly disregard the new tire tracks, but they were there. And immediately we remembered that the snowplowers could have stopped by. But the issue was, we saw the tire tracks because of the snow, and who plows in the dark? We also knew that once we were at the cabin, we would have no service on our cell phones. So we figured we would head back to town and message our Airbnb hosts and ask if it was them or one of their friends that had stopped by the apartments. I'm pausing to say, I think plows do go out in the dark, and I only know this because of the Karen Reed trial, but I'm not sure if it happens everywhere, especially in the middle of nowhere. But let's keep going because this is just the beginning of the story. She said, we waited for a while in town for a reply from our hosts, but they didn't answer back. We could have called, but at that point it was past 10 and we didn't want to be bad guests. We figured we blew the whole thing out of proportion and might as well head back to the cabin. After all, I am big into true crime, spooky subreddits, and horror movies, so I was probably just psyching myself out. My boyfriend drove us back, and this time we actually drove up the driveway towards the top of the hill part of the driveway, and I noticed something. My stomach dropped as I noticed footprints on the property. We backed down the driveway and took a closer look to see if there were more footprints. From what it looked like, someone had drove up the driveway, reversed down, parked, and then got out of the car and walked onto the property. Since we had now also driven on the tracks, we couldn't find where the footprints ended. The property was quite large with tons of trees and brush, and we knew that these footprints could go anywhere. The moment we saw footprints, we decided to call the police. We figured it was better safe than sorry. We would just have the officer go onto the property with us to check everything out. We drove down the road till we got service. We called the police and we waited for their arrival. The policeman showed up and we followed him onto the property. The police officer scanned the property and determined there was no one out there. Obviously, we were a little shaken up and a lot embarrassed. We thanked the officer as he left, and needless to say, neither of us wanted to sit in a hot tub in the dark woods after what had happened. Instead, we locked the doors and we watched a movie. Champagneless. We were both tired from the day and passed out pretty quickly. At 3 a.m., oh my God, it's 3 a.m. again. Why does it always happen at 3 a.m.? At 3 a.m., we both woke up on the couch with the TV on and all the lights, laughing about how the night didn't turn out as planned. And as my boyfriend went to brush his teeth, we heard a noise. It sounded mechanical, and it only lasted a few seconds. We looked at each other and froze. The garage door. There are very few reasons that someone would need to open the garage door of a guest-occupied Airbnb at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like I said, we woke up to all of our lights on, and the cabin had lots of windows. We knew that if someone was outside, they knew we were there, and they could see us. I immediately grabbed the landline and dialed 911. We sat crouched in the Airbnb praying for the police to arrive. We knew that whoever had made those tracks was still on the property, and this time they were making noises. As I sat talking to the operator, we heard a bang on our balcony as if someone threw something onto it. I was losing my absolute shit when the operator told me the police were nearby. All of a sudden, they were there. We saw the police lights and watched them search the property, and soon we heard banging on the door, and it was the police. We were okay. At the door were 2 policemen, one in front of us and one a little kind of behind us, kicking around snow and looking at the ground. I immediately noticed the police officer in the back as the officer that did the initial check on the property. I think OP is saying that these officers don't really care, that they're just like kicking snow, not really thinking this is a big deal. She said the police officer told us that not only was the garage door shut, but it was locked. And again, there was no signs of someone on the property. We discussed leaving, but the police officer said the roads were too dangerous that time of night. I looked at the officer who had come out to the property twice and felt I had deeply disappointed him. My boyfriend and I went back inside, again locking all the doors, and tried to sleep. The next day, we were leaving, and while we survived the night, I didn't feel right in that cabin anymore. It was forever the spooky cabin in my head, and I wanted to leave. As we packed, we heard the same noise that we heard at 3 a.m. It was the heater. A heater that sounds just like a garage. The sound lasts the same duration. My boyfriend looked at me and immediately said, "You need to give up your murder shows," and walked away. As if, and all, I was like, oh, she put as if because she's like a 90s or 80s baby, as if. She ended with, "As for the banging on the balcony, it was just the perfectly timed fall of a pine cone. I promise I'm not paranoid." I think back on the story a lot, and I'm embarrassed about how little came of it, but I'm also incredibly grateful for the same reason. But whoever drove onto the property and walked around, thank you for triggering all of my nightmares. Please stay home. And oh yeah, let's not meet. Well, I am sure you're able to find all of those reasonable explanations, and they probably make you feel less scared, but it doesn't diminish the fear in the moment, so it's valid. And this is why I can't be in the middle of nowhere, especially when the police, like in your case, are going to kind of like, just brush it off. And also the fact that they told you that the conditions were too bad, that almost sounds like they're in on it, but I get it. And I'm glad you're okay. It's probably better that you don't drive in those conditions. One commenter said, "I love how careful you are I'm reading a Richard Lehman horror book at the moment, and all the girls are being so stupid, splitting up and checking things out. I'd like to think I do what you did and live, LOL. And I'm asking, why are females always written to be so dumb in books and movies? The brainless beauty trope, it's mocked so well, especially in Scary Movie with Carmen Electra, one of my favorites, when Ghostface is actually chasing her, and she has a choice between the banana, a grenade, 2 different knives, and a gun, and she grabs the banana. It's iconic. It's a classic, but also it's a nod to the slasher and horror trope, the dumb girl who always gets killed. But the last comment I wanted to share is one that I felt aligned with my thoughts as well. It's from One Sassy Owl. They said, I'm sad about how the police reacted to this. They swore to protect people, and you thought you were in serious danger. I wish they would have questioned more and believed you, because there was actual footprints on the property and all. I'm curious if the landlords ever replied. Yeah, that's what I was saying. But they live out there, right? The police live out there, and maybe they're not as paranoid. But to be fair, they carry guns, and they're the law. But speaking of the law, did you know that there is an entire subreddit called RBI? Sort of like the FBI, but this is the Reddit Bureau of Investigation. That's right. And that's where this next story comes from. These have been a little bit longer on this video, but I think they're worth it in my opinion. But here goes. This one is from a user that has since deleted their account. It was from 4 years ago, and it's entitled, Help! Is my Airbnb haunted, or am I being watched? They were, of course, asking the RBI for advice on what to do. Here goes. I travel most months out of the year, and I just landed last night in Lima, Peru for an extended stay. I got a pretty fancy Airbnb in a nice location on the ocean. It had really great reviews, and I have already paid $750 for this month to stay here. It is an apartment with a main room with 2 tables in it on opposite sides of the room, a bedroom with a locking door, and a bathroom which you can only access through the bedroom. It also has a balcony with a sliding door that leads into the main room that can be locked. I arrived last night, and some weird things have started to happen since I got here. When I came in the apartment after my run this morning, I locked the door and I set the keys on the counter. I 100% remember doing this. I then left my shoes in the main room and smoked a cigar in my kitchen. I lit my cigar with my personalized lighter that I carry with me everywhere. I then went and took a 20-minute shower. Then, weird thing number 1 happened. When I came back to the main room from my shower, I went to get my lighter, and it was gone. I looked everywhere for it, and I was really confused because I know I left it on table number 1. After looking everywhere, I finally found it on the other side of the room on table number 2, which I haven't even sat down at since coming to this apartment. I thought it was super weird, but I tried not to freak myself out over it. Then weird thing number 2 happened. I then went to get my keys so I could go get some food. I go to the kitchen counter and they're gone. This, in conjunction with the moved lighter, starts to freak me out. So I look literally everywhere. I turned the entire apartment upside down. I looked in the refrigerator. I took apart the bed. I went through every pair of clothing I had. I even looked under the trash bag in the trash can. I looked everywhere and nothing. I couldn't find them. I have to say that I would be doing the same thing. And by the way, I'm going to give you a little idea or advice if you are staying alone or you're just in an Airbnb and you need a way to know if someone is there, but I'm going to wait. Let's keep going with the story. They said, weird thing number 3. I started to get a bit paranoid, but I'm still hungry. So I go to put my shoes on so I can get some food. And there is a razor blade in one of my shoes. Stop it. No. I think at that point I would be like, bye, I'm leaving. A razor blade. A regular razor blade. And OP says, I do not just own straight up razor blades. There are no razor blades that I know of in this apartment. Where the F did this razor blade come from? So now I start to freak out. And I call my friend and I go on my balcony and I talk to him for like 15 minutes and I explain what's going on. And he tells me to start looking through my apartment for cameras. I start pulling the place apart, looking at the wall decorations. I'm doing this for about 10 minutes before I get to the kitchen and my effing keys are back on the counter. What is going on? My friend thinks someone might be somehow watching me, either by a camera or double-sided glass or something, and is trying to mess with me or threaten me. I'm also worried about that, but I'm wondering if my apartment is somehow haunted. How do I figure out what's going on? I feel unsafe, but at the same time, I paid $750 for this apartment and I doubt I will get it back if I leave now. How do I figure out if someone is watching me or breaking into my apartment? Any advice is appreciated. Thank you. Now, the original poster edited this post to say, edit, for those asking if I'm high, I don't do drugs, so that's unlikely. And for the carbon monoxide theory, I sent a photo of the razor to my friend and they definitely see it. So I don't think it's hallucination. And then they said, I'm in the process of contacting Airbnb to try to get my money back and in somewhere new now. Thanks, guys. They also gave an update. They said, I spent the night at a different hotel and I'm currently trying to get my money back and find a new Airbnb. Thanks so much for all your advice and concern. So let's see what some of the comments were. Candace Joe 997 said, leave now. Your life is worth more than $750, and I'm sure Airbnb will refund you if you tell them there was a break-in. Another person agreed and said, yeah, I would get into another Airbnb tonight and try to get your money back in the coming days. It's not worth risking your safety and or your sanity over it. Exactly. And the whole idea of a vacation is to relax. It's not to stress. And this person was spending most of their time rummaging through this place and being paranoid, but for valid reasons. But still, no way is that worth the stress. But I do wonder what could have been happening here. Because I can't believe some people were actually asking the original poster if they were on drugs or hallucinating, but fair enough, right? The razor blade though, that's odd. Now I was trying to reconcile that in my mind to be like, where else would a razor blade come from? I mean, I use them to like scratch things off of tiles, or I don't know, some people that are painting will use it to like scrape paint, but that's just so not what's happening here. But someone commented, this actually may be a scam to freak you out, get you to leave, and then they keep your money. I didn't think of that, but others did and they agreed, so that could be it. Now, Jiu-Jitsu Boy 2001 had my thoughts, sort of. They said, you could leave your laptop open with the camera on and facing your keys or whatever else and have somebody watch it. Then do something that seems like it would trigger the weirdness, like taking a shower. And then the friend watching can let you know if anyone moves or if anybody enters. And the advice I was going to give is that we have a baby monitor that we got last year when we had our new baby. And they have gotten so good, right? They're really high quality. And ours actually records. So it's really convenient to bring on a trip to monitor your whole room. It's called Kubo, I think, and it detaches from the base. So you don't have to focus it on a crib. You can take it off and you can position it anywhere, and it has sound and night vision. So it's perfect. And there's an app where you can watch from your phone. So yeah, I would get yourself one of those or something like it. And speaking about the person asking if the OP was high, this next story definitely involves some party favors, if you will, that could have made things worse, but it's a scary one. So here goes. It's from the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Princess Vana, and it's called A Midnight Visitor in a Cabin in the Woods. I have to say, you already know, but I am freaked out just by the title. She said, this is a true story, and every time I tell it, it pulls the eyes of everyone in the room. I'm not sure why I haven't posted it before, but upon reflecting with a friend, I decided it was time to share. In the summer of 2020, my friends Alex and Violet and I decided to go on a mountain vacation. COVID cabin fever had hit us hard, and we wanted desperately to get out. We settled on a mountainous state and planned to go camp and hike at several different locations. For one night, we thought it would be fun to book a cabin in the woods. Violet's parents had rented a fire tower once and loved it, but a cabin beside a fire tower was all we could find. It was cheap, clean, and secluded. Excited to have a night where we could be as obnoxious as we wanted. So we booked it. And I just wanted to ask, I didn't know what a fire tower was, so I had to do a little Googling. And I can't believe I live in California where there's a lot of wildfires and I didn't know, but I don't live in a woodsy area. Google said a fire tower is a tall structure often situated on high ground used for the detection of fires, which I could have figured out. It says a fire lookout or watch is a person who works in the tower, and using this high vantage point, they're able to spot smoke and flames and report them to help crews respond quickly. These towers provide a 360-degree view of the surrounding landscape, and many are equipped with instruments like the Osborne Firefinder to pinpoint the exact location of a fire. So there you go. At least you have some context in case, like me, you didn't know. And I found out, like this OP was saying, you can stay in one as an Airbnb. And I found one. This is a 60-foot tall tower. And all I have to say is no, because that in and of itself looks like its own horror story without even a story. Just looking at it makes me get the chills. But okay, they didn't find a fire tower to stay in, but they found a cabin next to one. In the weeks leading up to the trip, we decided it would be a great idea to drop acid at the cabin. Oh. So Violet brought an entire sheet in preparation for our arrival, and it was tucked in her bag as we pulled out of the driveway to make our way to the cabin. But I remember this knot in the pit of my stomach, this aching feeling that gnawed at me. I told Alex and Violet that there was no way we could drop acid that night. And Violet was pissed. We turned around. We got into a massive argument, but I stood my ground. I just knew that we had no business tripping that night. Finally, the fireworks settled and we were off. The cabin was roughly 30 minutes away from the nearest town. It sat atop a mountain, and we held our breath as we rounded the busted road that spiraled towards the top. There were no pull-offs, no other campsites, just a long, winding road that led us to the cabin at the peak. We settled in and started a fire to keep warm. As dusk gave way to night, we heard the unmistakable noise of an engine on the road, then the flash of headlights. A side-by-side with 3 kids arrived and our nerves settled. They smiled, they gave us a wave, and they climbed the fire tower, and then they left. We'd heard there may be occasional visitors to the fire tower, but they were the only ones who had come by. We doused our fire and moved inside, heated some hot dogs until they were lukewarm, ate them fast, and sat in silence. You don't know how quiet it is until you're in the middle of nowhere. You can hear every rustle of the leaves, the whisper of the wind through their branches. You get so used to white noise living in the city, there's always the hum of an air conditioner or the dim roar of traffic to focus on. But here, the closest thing to white noise was the sound of our own breathing. We jumped with every noise, too frightened to speak to one another, and finally, I'd had enough. I cracked a few wine coolers, passed them to Alex and Violet, and slapped a board game down on the table between our bunk beds. It didn't take long for us to loosen, and we were laughing, having the ruckus good time we envisioned, much soberer than we thought, but enough that we were able to ignore the rumble of the woods. And later, we'd all recall hearing noises in the background, the snap of a twig, the dim rumble of an engine, but none of us wanted to rupture the air of nonchalance between us, so we ignored it. Until a human hand reached up to the window between us and slapped it 3 times. We were screaming in an instant. Alex called 911, put them on speaker, and handed his cell to me. He grabbed the pokers from the fireplace and passed them out. Violet started calling family members and saying her last goodbyes. I held my breath, and I listened for any more noise. Whoever this was, whatever this was, would have heard us call 911, and now they were being careful to make a silent retreat. Dispatch arrived 20 minutes later, a lucky thing for a 1 o'clock emergency call, and had their dogs comb the mountain. Nothing. They suggested it may have been a bear, but I could tell from their faces that they didn't believe that for a second. We'd barely cooked those hot dogs, and why would a bear smack the window by a couple of screaming kids rather than the one closest to the pan we used to cook? Why would a bear knock on the window like a human? Why, when we screamed, did the bear make a stealthy retreat? They had no answers, but they had one antidote. As they sped to us, they came across a car at the base of the mountain, but that was the only sign of life they'd seen. I remember my blood ran cold, but Violet and Alex were too frazzled to absorb the weight of what they'd said and dizzied by a new horror, Violet's car. It was thoroughly dusted by our drive up the mountain, and it was covered in handprints. Handprints that didn't match ours, that touched places that we hadn't. We grabbed our shit by the armful and threw it inside, eager to remove every part of ourselves from this mountain. We followed the police, grateful at every pothole found us further and further from that wretched cabin. We made it down in record time and found lodging at a seedy hotel that reeked of cat piss. I couldn't sleep. The thought of that car on the road rang in my head. Remember, there was nothing else on that mountain. It was a narrow road to the top. No pull-offs, no other campsites. But there was the fire tower. Maybe a visitor decided to spook us during their late night excursion. But the kids from earlier, we'd seen their headlights. Whoever did this had stopped their vehicle further down the road and hiked the rest of the way. They didn't want to be spotted. They wanted silence, secrecy. Whoever this was hadn't been looking for a cheap scare. They planned this. I don't think I'll ever know what the person on the mountain wanted from me. I don't know if it was a practical joke or the beginning of a night of terror. I'm just grateful for Alex's quick wit in calling 911. I wonder if our visitor knew we had service. It had certainly been a welcome surprise to us. Perhaps that was the wrench in his plan, enough to spook him before he could make things ugly. In truth, I don't know if I want to know. I think I'm just content to say, midnight stranger, let's not meet. I have to say, everything is a big no for me. I have residual effects from intracranial hypotension from a botched lumbar puncture, story for another day. So I get very dizzy easily, even hanging decorations for Halloween. So heights are no, although I will torture myself with a good roller coaster now and then. But being out in the middle of nowhere and the handprints, no. The first and most popular comment was from No Quarter 3032. And they said, good thing you didn't drop that acid. Yeah, that would have been heart attack inducing. So, I agree. OP said, can you imagine us tripping out of our minds while someone's outside terrorizing us? I'm glad I had that gut feeling. Right. And OP, maybe that gut feeling was for this whole trip, not just the acid one, the entire trip to this cabin. Ever think of that? One commenter added, to be honest, it was probably someone who likes to sleep or live in the cabin when it's unoccupied and was mad that you were all there when they came home. People do live in the woods, and occasionally they're pretty put off in the head. There are several true crime stories of murders committed by unhinged hermits that lived in and around national parks and wilderness preserves. Probably a good thing you left when you did. And I have to say, good point. Good comment. That could be a possibility, but wouldn't the cabin be locked? Because this was like a Airbnb, so I don't know. Although one person, Mediocre Photo 7756, said, your friend started calling family members and saying her last goodbye. Hella dramatic. Made me think the story was fake, but it was pretty anticlimactic, so I believe you. OP responded, I wish I was joking, but she really did. LMFAO. So they're even laughing at their friend. But you know what? She was scared, and someone else did want some clarification. It was Mike Salami. He said, can you expand on what happened? Someone slammed a window 3 times and your friend just assumed y'all get murdered. Listen, buddy, this is from me. The hands in places that they know they didn't put their hands. That's enough. I would rather be safe than dead, but I get it. It was probably a prank. But what if this were an elderly couple, and they had an actual heart attack from it? I think I'm going to end it here for today, but I did want to point out, don't forget, I have a new link to share your stories. And I also have a subreddit with the same name as my channel, Candidly Kimbyr, if you would prefer to post on Reddit. But it's easy to follow the link. And I love reading all of your stories. And one of your stories could end up on this channel, read by me. I do want to thank you so much for being here every week. I will see you soon in my next video, and please stay safe, especially if you're traveling soon. Bye.